My name is Emily Catherine Reed, and I'm a 44-year-old emergency room nurse at Memorial Hospital in Portland. What I'm about to share with you is my near-death experience's testimony of what happened when Jesus showed me the shocking truth about the mark of the beast. I really saw how dangerous the mark of the beast is and what specific instructions Jesus revealed to protect ourselves from it. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. It happened on February 15, 2022. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour night shift in the ER, the kind where you barely have time to catch your breath between traumas. We'd lost 2 patients that night, a teenager from a car accident and an elderly man from a massive heart attack. As I was driving home, I remember thinking about how quickly life can change, how one moment someone can be here and the next they're gone. I had no idea I was about to experience that truth firsthand. The winter rain was coming down in sheets, making visibility poor on the winding roads leading to our suburban home. My husband David, a high school teacher, would be getting our 3 kids ready for their day. I was looking forward to kissing their sleepy faces before they left for school, then crawling into my warm bed for some much-needed rest. I remember checking my rear-view mirror and seeing the headlights of a semi-truck behind me. The road was slick with rain, and the truck was coming up fast. What happened next came in fragments, the truck's brakes screeching on the wet pavement, my car hydroplaning as I tried to avoid collision, the sickening crunch of metal, and then, darkness. The moment of separation between body and spirit was unlike anything I could have imagined. 1 second, I was trapped in the mangled wreck of my car. The next, I was floating above it, watching as first responders worked frantically to extract my body. I could see everything with perfect clarity, better than normal vision. I watched as they used the jaws of life to cut through the crushed driver's side door. I saw the young paramedic, barely out of training, performing chest compressions while whispering prayers under his breath. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I felt no pain anymore, but of course I couldn't. That's when I saw my grandfather, who had passed away 5 years earlier from pancreatic cancer. He stood at the edge of the scene, looking exactly as he had in the photos from his Air Force days, young, strong, and full of life. His presence was so unexpected, so real, that if I'd had physical eyes, they would have filled with tears. "It's not your time yet, Emily," he said gently, "but there's something you need to see first." As he spoke these words, everything around us began to fill with the most extraordinary light I've ever encountered. It wasn't harsh or blinding, rather it was warm and alive, pulsing with love and purpose. The accident scene faded away, and I felt myself being drawn upward through what I can only describe as a tunnel of living light. The sensation was unlike anything in human experience. Colors I had never seen before swirled around me, and I could hear what sounded like thousands of voices singing in perfect harmony. The peace I felt was indescribable. All my earthly worries, fears, and pain simply melted away. I remember thinking, if this is death, why are we afraid of it? Then I heard his voice. "Emily." Just one word, but it contained more love, authority, and power than anything I had ever experienced. I knew instantly it was Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, yet I felt completely safe and known. As my spiritual eyes adjusted to his glory, I could see him more clearly. His appearance was both familiar and utterly transcendent, human yet divine. His eyes held such depth of wisdom and compassion that I felt every moment of my life was laid bare before him, yet I felt no shame, only perfect love and acceptance. "My daughter," he said, "I have brought you here because what I must show you cannot wait any longer. The time is short, and my people must be warned." I found myself able to speak, though not with physical words. "Lord," I responded, "I'm just a nurse. I've seen so many patients talk about near-death experiences. Who will believe me?" His smile was gentle, but carried an unmistakable authority. "Emily, I have chosen you precisely because you understand both the physical and spiritual aspects of life and death. You have witnessed countless souls pass between worlds. You understand how the body works, how the mind thinks, and how the spirit connects to both. This knowledge will help you comprehend what I'm about to show you." Then Jesus did something unexpected. He took my hand, and suddenly we were standing in what appeared to be a modern city street. But something was different, though I couldn't immediately put my finger on what it was. The scene before us was bustling with activity, people going about their daily lives, but there was an eerie uniformity to how they moved and interacted. What you're seeing, Jesus explained, is your world, but a few years from now. Watch carefully, and I will show you how the great deception unfolds, how technology becomes the tool that separates humanity from their creator. As I stood there with Jesus, watching the future unfold before my eyes, he directed my attention to a young woman entering a coffee shop. She was professionally dressed, probably in her late 20s, and moved with a confident air of someone who had fully embraced the modern world. What caught my attention wasn't her appearance, but what happened when she went to pay for her drink. There was no fumbling for a wallet, no phone to tap, not even a smartwatch to wave. She simply moved her right hand over a small sensor, and a faint blue light pulsed beneath her skin. Transaction complete. It was so seamless, so natural, that had Jesus not drawn my attention to it, I might have missed its significance entirely. "Lord," I asked, "is this the mark of the beast?" "No," Jesus replied. "This is what comes before, the preparation, the conditioning. Watch how the deception unfolds." The scene shifted, and suddenly I was watching a montage of events, like a time-lapse of history yet to come. I saw how this technology had been gradually introduced worldwide. It started innocently enough, tiny chips that replaced credit cards, house keys, and medical records. Everyone praised their convenience, their security. Christians adopted them just as readily as non-believers, seeing them as nothing more remarkable than the smartphones and smartwatches that had come before. I watched as church congregations embraced these devices wholeheartedly. They used them to access their digital Bibles, give tithes, and check into church events. Pastors praised the technology for making ministry more efficient, for helping them better serve their congregations. No one questioned it because it didn't involve worship or pledging allegiance to anything or anyone. It was just technology, or so they thought. "Notice," Jesus said, "how the enemy first introduces things that seem harmless, even helpful. Satan knows that a sudden change would alert my people. Instead, he moves slowly, gradually, like a serpent slowly coiling around its prey." The scenes continued to unfold before me. The technology became more sophisticated, more integrated into daily life. What started as simple payment and identification chips evolved into something far more invasive. These new devices could monitor health in real time, predicting illness before it happened, even regulating people's sleep patterns and mood through subtle biochemical adjustments. I watched, horrified, as parents eagerly had their children implanted with these devices. "It's for their safety," they would say. "Now we can always know where they are, monitor their health, and ensure they're safe at school." The technology was particularly marketed toward children, presented as a way to protect them in an increasingly dangerous world. "Lord," I said, my heart breaking as I watched a mother comfort her crying child after receiving the implant, "I can see how helpful this all seems. As a nurse, I understand the appeal of constant health monitoring. As a mother, I understand wanting to keep our children safe. How can we warn people against something that appears to do so much good?" Jesus looked at me with deep compassion. "This is why the deception is so effective. The enemy knows that my people would reject something obviously evil. So he comes as an angel of light, offering solutions to problems, promising to make life better, safer, more convenient. But watch what happens to those who accept these improvements." The scene shifted, and I saw how the technology began to affect people's behavior in subtle but profound ways. Those with the implants became increasingly dependent on them for everything, from regulating their emotions to making decisions. The devices would suggest what to eat, when to sleep, who to spend time with, even what to think about certain issues. "Watch this carefully," Jesus instructed, directing my attention to a family having dinner. At first glance, it looked normal, parents and children sitting together, sharing a meal. But something was terribly wrong. Their conversations seemed scripted, their emotions measured and controlled. The devices were subtly influencing their moods, their thoughts, their very personalities. "They're not even aware of it," Jesus explained. "The changes happen so gradually that they don't notice their free will slipping away, their ability to hear my voice becoming dimmer." I watched technology's influence spread through every aspect of society. In healthcare, my own field, it was particularly insidious. Hospitals and insurance companies began requiring staff and patients to have these implants. For better patient care, they said. For more accurate monitoring. For safer medication administration. The scene shifted to a hospital, and I saw myself, or rather, what could have been myself in this future. A nurse was being called into her supervisor's office. She was one of the few who had refused the implant, and despite her years of experience and excellent record, she was being let go. "We can't risk patient safety," the supervisor was saying. "What if you make a medication error that the system could have prevented? What if you miss a subtle change in a patient's condition that the implant would have caught?" "Do you see?" Jesus asked. "How do they use good intentions, safety, health protection, to implement control?" The vision expanded to show me various scenes from around the world. I saw how the technology was being implemented differently in different cultures, but always with the same underlying goal, to create dependency and control. In some places, it was promoted through healthcare systems, in others, through financial incentives, in yet others, through social pressure and the fear of being left behind. But what truly broke my heart was watching how this technology affected children's spiritual development. Jesus showed me a scene in an elementary school classroom, not too different from where my own children attend. The students, all around 7 or 8 years old, were having what they called digital wellness class. "Today we're going to learn about how our smart health implants help us make good choices," the teacher was saying cheerfully. "Remember, if you're feeling angry or sad, your implant will help you feel better. If you're thinking unkind thoughts, it will help you think nice ones instead. Do you see the danger here?" Jesus asked me. These little ones are being taught to trust technology more than their own God-given emotions, more than their own conscience, more than me. I watched as a little girl. She reminded me so much of my Emma, raised her hand. "But what if I want to feel sad sometimes? My grandma died last month, and Mommy says it's okay to feel sad about that." The teacher's response was swift and practiced. "Your implant knows what's best for you, sweetie. It understands that prolonged negative emotions aren't healthy. Now, let's all take a moment to accept our mood adjustment, shall we?" I watched in horror as the children's faces transformed in unison, their natural expressions replaced by peaceful, vacant smiles. "Lord," I whispered, "they're programming them to ignore their natural emotional responses, their very humanity." "Yes," Jesus replied. "And more importantly, they're being programmed to ignore the convictions of the Holy Spirit. How can they feel godly sorrow over sin if all negative emotions are suppressed? How can they experience true repentance if their conscience is chemically and digitally controlled?" The scene shifted again, and I saw how the technology evolved to become even more invasive. What started as simple chips had developed into neural interfaces that could actually influence thoughts and decisions. People welcomed these upgrades enthusiastically, seeing them as the next step in human evolution. "Watch carefully now," Jesus said, "for this is how the final deception will be implemented." Suddenly, I was watching a series of global catastrophes unfold: financial systems collapsing, power grids failing, supply chains breaking down. The world was in chaos, and people were desperate for solutions. That's when I saw them, world leaders appearing on screens everywhere, announcing a new solution to the crisis. "The existing implant technology that has served us so well must be upgraded," they said. "A new, more secure, more integrated system is necessary to prevent further crises. The upgrade is mandatory, but the process will be simple and painless." I watched as media outlets promoted the upgrade. Religious leaders appeared on television, assuring their followers that it was just technology, not the mark of the beast. They pointed out that it didn't require worshipping anyone or pledging allegiance to any leader. Many quoted scriptures out of context to support their position. "Now," Jesus said, "I will show you what they cannot see." Suddenly, I could see both the physical and spiritual realms simultaneously. What I witnessed was horrifying. As people received the upgrade, a subtle but profound change occurred in their spirits. It wasn't obvious at first. They could still pray, still go to church, still read their Bibles, but something fundamental had changed. The mark, Jesus explained, won't be implemented through force at first. It will be accepted willingly, even eagerly. The enemy has learned that persecution only strengthens my true followers. Instead, he uses deception, making the mark seem like a natural, beneficial step forward. I watched as weeks and months passed in the vision. Those who accepted the upgrade began to change in subtle ways. Their prayers became mechanical, their worship routine rather than genuine. Most disturbing of all, their ability to discern spiritual truth began to fade. Lord, I asked, why can't they see what's happening to them? Because the change is gradual, he replied. Like a frog in slowly heating water, they don't realize they're being cut off from my spirit until it's too late. The technology doesn't just change what they can buy or sell, it changes who they are at a fundamental level. It corrupts the image of God in which they were created. The vision showed me how the upgrade affected different aspects of society. In healthcare, my own field, it promised perfect health monitoring and automatic treatment. In finance, it offered complete security and universal access to resources. In relationships, it claimed to facilitate better understanding and communication. But what broke my heart most was watching families make the decision together. Parents would gather their children, explaining how this upgrade would keep them safe, help them succeed in school, and ensure their future in the new world system. They genuinely believed they were doing what was best for their children. Watch this carefully, Jesus instructed me. See how they use fear and isolation to push those who are hesitant. I saw news reports about children being denied education, about people losing their jobs, about families being unable to buy food or medicine. The pressure to accept the upgrade became intense. Churches split over the issue, with many leaders advocating for acceptance to maintain their witness in society. Then Jesus showed me something beautiful: those who had refused the mark. They faced increasing difficulties, yes. They couldn't buy food from regular stores or send their children to public schools. Many lost their jobs. But spiritually, they were shining like beacons in the growing darkness. These are my faithful ones, Jesus said. They can see what others cannot because they have kept their spiritual eyes open. They have studied my word and learned to discern truth from lies. I watched as these believers formed communities, supporting each other, sharing resources, helping those who were struggling. They weren't violent or fearful, they were peaceful but firm in their convictions. Most amazingly, I saw supernatural provision, food multiplying, needs being met in unexpected ways, divine protection from those who would harm them. My people will not be abandoned, Jesus assured me. Just as I provided for Elijah by the brook and for the Israelites in the wilderness, I will provide for those who stay faithful to me. Lord, I asked, what should people watch for? How can they recognize this when it begins? Jesus' response was clear and direct. First, watch for technology that promises to make you better than how I created you. The enemy will offer improvements to the human mind and body, but these will come with a cost to the soul. Remember, I created humanity in my image, and any attempt to upgrade that image is an act of rebellion against my design. Second, he continued, notice when convenience becomes compulsory. What begins as optional will slowly become necessary for daily life. The enemy knows that forcing people to take the mark immediately would cause many to refuse. Instead, he will make it increasingly difficult to live without it until many will beg to receive it. Third, pay special attention to how technology affects children. The enemy targets the young, knowing they will accept more easily what their parents might question. Watch for technology that promises to make children safer, smarter, or better behaved, but actually separates them from their God-given nature and their ability to hear my voice. Fourth, observe how these changes affect people's relationship with me. Anything that dulls spiritual sensitivity, that makes prayer feel more distant, that reduces the conviction of sin, these are warning signs. The mark isn't just about buying and selling, it's about separating humanity from their Creator. As we watch these future scenes unfold, Jesus showed me specific examples of how the deception would progress. I saw how the initial technology would be marketed as purely physical, nothing spiritual about it at all. It's just a chip, they would say. It's just for convenience and safety. But gradually, it would evolve to affect things that were profoundly spiritual. I watched as people's ability to feel God's presence began to dim after receiving the implants. Their prayers felt empty, their worship mechanical. Yet most troubling of all, they didn't even notice the change. The technology slowly rewired their brains to interpret religious experiences differently. What used to bring them to tears in worship now barely moved them. What used to feel like clear guidance from the Holy Spirit became muted and unclear. The enemy knows, Jesus explained, that if he tried to stop people from worshiping me altogether, many would resist. Instead, he allows them to go through the motions of religion while slowly severing their genuine connection to me. They have a form of godliness but deny its power. I saw how the upgrade affected different generations differently. The elderly often resisted at first, remembering simpler times and feeling uneasy about the changes. The middle-aged usually accepted it for practical reasons, to keep their jobs, to access their bank accounts, to function in society. But the young embraced it enthusiastically, seeing it as the next step in human evolution. Remember, Jesus said, when you return, that the young are both the most vulnerable and the most important to protect. They must be taught to love me more than they love the world's conveniences. They must learn to recognize my voice before the noise of technology drowns it out. Then Jesus showed me something that brought me to tears, how families would be divided over this issue. I saw parents agonizing over whether to accept the technology for their children's sake. I saw siblings split over the decision, some choosing convenience and worldly success, others choosing to stay faithful despite the cost. This is why I'm showing you these things now, Jesus said, so you can warn others to prepare their hearts and strengthen their faith before the testing comes. When the time comes, those who know me, truly know me, will recognize the deception. Those who only know about me will be easily deceived. I saw scenes of supernatural provision that amazed me. Believers who had refused the mark finding food miraculously multiplied in their pantries. Communities of faithful Christians supporting each other, sharing resources, teaching each other's children. I saw angels protecting these communities, turning aside those who would harm them. My protection, Jesus assured me, will be as real as the persecution. I will not abandon my faithful ones. But then Jesus showed me something that broke my heart. People I knew, people I worshipped with, accepting the mark thinking they could still maintain their faith. Tell them, he said, that once the mark is taken, it changes something fundamental in human nature. It doesn't just change what they can buy or sell, it changes their very ability to connect with me. I watched as people who had been strong believers gradually lost their spiritual sensitivity after taking the mark. Their prayers became ritualistic, their worship perfunctory. Most heartbreaking of all, they couldn't even perceive what they had lost. Lord, I asked, what should people do to prepare? His answer was clear. Tell them to strengthen their relationship with me now, before the deception comes. They must know my voice so well that they can recognize when something is not from me. Tell them to study my word diligently. The answers are there, but they must know the truth to recognize the lies. Tell them to build real relationships with other believers. They will need each other in the times to come. Tell them to teach their children to love me more than they love the world's conveniences. And most importantly, tell them not to fear. I have overcome the world, and those who stay faithful to me will share in that victory. Suddenly, I felt a familiar pulling sensation. It's time for you to return, Jesus said. Remember everything you have seen. But Lord, I protested, there's so much more I want to ask. His smile was full of love. What I have shown you is enough. Share it faithfully. Those who have ears to hear will listen. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air on the trauma room table, surrounded by my shocked colleagues. Dr. Rodriguez, who had pronounced me dead minutes earlier, was staring at me in disbelief. The monitors showed my heart had spontaneously started beating again, something that, in my years of nursing experience, I had rarely seen happen after such a prolonged period of cardiac arrest. My injuries should have been fatal, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and severe trauma. Yet here I was, not only alive but healing at a rate that baffled my doctors. Within weeks, I had recovered enough to return home to my family, though the weight of what I had seen would forever change me. It's been 2 years since my near-death experience, and every day I see more signs of what Jesus showed me unfolding in our world. As a nurse, I'm particularly aware of how medical technology is advancing in the exact ways he revealed. But I'm not against all technology. I still use it in my work to help patients. What I am is deeply aware of the line that's coming, the line that once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. I share this testimony not to frighten you, but to warn and prepare those who will listen. Jesus showed me that time is short, but his protection for his faithful ones will be perfect. If you're watching this, please take it to heart. Strengthen your relationship with Jesus now, study his word, build strong connections with other believers, and most importantly, teach your children to love God more than they love the world's conveniences. May God give you eyes to see and ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches in these last days.